Welcome again, everybody, to the Retro Monster Truck Review. I'm your host, Josh Rhodes, and today we're going to be talking about Cleveland 1987 with our buddy Colby Marshall from the MTRC Racing Series on YouTube. As always, I want to thank you guys for all of the support that you've given me through Apple iTunes with 5-star reviews, the follows on Spotify, and of course, liking, commenting, subscribing on our YouTube page. Retro Monster Truck Review thanks you guys very, very much for that. If you head over to bonfire.com/RetroMTReview, you can see merchandise for this podcast as well. The original t-shirt is still up there, and there's a few surprises coming down the road I think you guys are really going to enjoy as well. But without further ado, it's time to get to Cleveland 1987 with my buddy Colby Marshall here on the Retro Monster Truck Review. Welcome again, everybody, to another edition of the Retro Monster Truck Review. This week, a little bit of a unique venue here. This is TNT Motorsports putting on an event in Cleveland, Ohio, July 11th, 1987, at Cleveland Stadium, or better known as Cleveland Municipal Stadium. On the show this week with me, my good buddy, Mr. 1987, Colby Marshall. Colby, how's it going, man?
What an odd name to be given, but I guess that's kind of my thing here now.
You're the one that told me to call you Mr. 1987.
Oh, come on. I don't think I told you to call me that, but I've kind of turned into that, as it seems like this is my third time on the show and third show from 1987, but hey, I love that year.
Hey, it's a good year. It's a very, very good year. I mean, we had TNT Monster Trucks going on that year, so of course it's going to be covered on this show.
There you go.
This place right here, though, is a very unique venue for monster trucks. The multi-purpose stadium for baseball and football. This was the home of the Cleveland Indians and the home of the Cleveland Browns for a very long time here, from about 1945 until the demolishing in 1997, I believe. The last Browns game was played in 95. I believe that was the last event, sports-wise, held in that venue. But there are a lot of cool things that actually happened in this place in the middle of Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, it's an interesting stadium. I'm kind of a geek for stadium history, in addition to, being a geek for monster trucks, like is obvious right now. But this was one of, as far as I know, it may even be the first like dual use stadium, and it really preceded that trend in sports stadiums by probably a good 15 to 20 years. And it's an interesting place to have it built in a mid-market town like Cleveland, Ohio, to build a football stadium and baseball stadium that was bigger than Yankee Stadium in New York City. I mean, it was the largest permanent home of any MLB, permanent home of any MLB team. Mm-hmm. There were a couple temporary homes that were a little bigger, but it's just a weird place to build this, and, well, this is a weird event, so it all kind of fits.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, though, this venue for an outdoor facility for baseball and football could hold a capacity of about 84,000 people. I think a record was like 84,100 and something people inside this place at one time. And that, for the years that this thing was in operations, is insane to think about, of how many people that were actually there. And unfortunately, they didn't show up to this show, but they did for some of these sporting events that they had there. Cleveland Browns were actually a big team in the early NFL. They won the NFL championship in 1945 inside this venue, defeated the Washington Redskins. About 5 years later, they defeated the Los Angeles Rams for the same championship in 1950. In 1952, though, the Detroit Lions come back. They take that title away from them. And then in 54, the Browns turn around and they just absolutely destroyed the Lions inside this venue, 56-10. What's another cool stat here, the first baseball stat that I've seen, was Ted Williams actually hit his 500th career home run inside this venue. And then the next one, obviously another NFL stat, the Browns defeat the Baltimore Colts 27-0 in the 64 championship. The Beatles played this stadium in 66. 1970, the first ever Monday Night Football was played. Browns defeated the Jets. 74. This one, I sent this one to you earlier because I thought it was just the funniest stat in the world. 10-cent beer night for the Texas Rangers and the Indians hosting the Texas Rangers. And while promoting a 10-cent cup of beer, the fans basically were coming to the stadium, and due to rowdiness and intoxicated fans, the Indians were actually forced to forfeit the game.
you know, whoever thought 10 cent beer night in a town that would show up to football games in negative 20-degree weather with winds blowing in off the lake, wearing nothing but bulldog masks, really didn't think this one through, because Cleveland was well known for having their rowdy fans. And it's interesting, we talk about the Browns, and you mentioned a game that that they played against the LA Rams. It was actually the LA Rams actually started and preceded the Browns in this building as the Cleveland Rams.
Yes, actually, I did forget about that stat. They started as the Cleveland Rams, and then they left 27 days later, and they were moved to Los Angeles, which it ended up happening again, ironically, to the Browns later in life. April 8th, 1975, to keep with the 70s theme going on here, MLB had their first black manager. Hall of Famer Frank Robinson made his debut here. It's the first black manager in Major League Baseball history. In the latter stages of career, he had been acquired as a player, but in the previous months leading up to the season, he basically just started to serve as a player manager. And I mean, it was a historic day whenever he did that. They actually had a 5-3 win over the Yankees. Over 56,000 people watched that. And then we go into the 80s. Lynn Baker's perfect game pitched a 10-inning perfect game, 10th perfect game in baseball history to that point. And there's a lot of history there between 81 and when baseball started. I think that's only the 10th perfect game in that illustrious long time in between the first and this game.
Yeah.
January 11th, 1987, one of Cleveland's many sports disappointments actually happens, and that, of course, is the drive by John Elway. Elway leads the Broncos 98 yards down the field to take a tying score late in the AFC Championship. Denver would go on to win 23-20, earning the right to play in Super Bowl 21. 21 didn't go Denver's way, but still, that's an iconic moment in sports history. Still got a lot of views on YouTube just from that drive. Nobody thought Elway could run 98 yards, especially in that era against that Browns team.
Yeah, it really is amazing for a stadium that, kind of is panned in the history of stadiums. I think locally, a lot of people have a lot of fond memories, obviously, of the place, but I think overall, historically, it's just not looked at as a very good place. I mean, it's not just, there's nothing really super special about it. There's,
other than winning some sports championships in the 50s and 60s, there really isn't much to talk about except 10 cent beer night at the place.
But ironically, though, I mean, there is in that an amazing amount of history actually did happen. 4 All-Star games, more than any other stadium in Major League history. 35, 54, 63, and 81. You mentioned, the Beatles, the Stones, Pink Floyd, Beach Boys, Aerosmith, The Who, Springsteen. I mean, all these iconic acts came through there. So I guess just when you're around that much time, I mean, the first event that ever happened in the building, literally 2 days after it was opened, was a World Boxing Heavyweight Championship match with the legendary Max Schmeling winning, and I mean, that's all just, it's amazing how much happened to and in this building that really, I mean, it literally has been called the mistake on the lake, and yet all this history happened there. So it's a very interesting place.
Then after the 87, the drive with the Cleveland Browns losing to the Broncos there, it seems like the stadium and the teams just fall off, because the next bit of notes and news that we have really comes from 1993, and that's the last Indians game held there against the White Sox, a 4-0 loss for the Indians. Then on December 17th, 1995, a couple of years later, the Browns and the Bengals have the last Browns game in this place, and it's a win for the Browns, ironically 26-10. But that game, I mean, if you've ever seen footage of that game, fans are not happy at this place. There is trash being thrown onto the field. There's seats being ripped up. Nobody wanted the Browns to leave the Cleveland area.
Yeah, and that just, I mean, it speaks to the blue collar. I mean, they were tied to their team there, and Cleveland is that's what Cleveland, by all accounts, really is they're that blue collar town that they were tied to their baseball and their football, and especially their football, and they didn't take too kindly to that. And I, being from St. Louis and having, football taken from us a couple of times over the year, over my lifetime, I can understand, the frustration that comes with that. But yeah, they when even after they tore this thing down, probably the most noble use was the fact that they changed it into a fishing reef offshore in Lake Erie. I mean, they took this thing and dumped it in the lake. So the mistake on the lake became the mistake in the lake, I guess.
Exactly.
But,
I imagine if you were to go scuba dive in that lake, you could probably find some memorabilia from this place still there. Wouldn't shock me at all.
Entirely possible, and I'm sure it's created quite a good fishing opportunity there off the the shore of Lake Erie.
You imagine tossing the fishing reel in there and reeling it in. Oh, John Elway's football that he did the drive with.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to guess you might not find anything like that, but you might find a beer can or two.
Hey, you might find an antique 40-year-old beer can.
Yeah.
From the NFL championship or something. But anyway,
holy cow!
The stadium.
There's a Yingling can. Wow, look at that.
The stadium itself, though, was actually an economic drain on the city of Cleveland. To make a really long story short here, the Browns basically left Cleveland overnight, and there were very little news footage of this. They caught a few of the trucks leaving, and I tell you what, it's almost cowardly is the way that it's looked at nowadays, the way that they left the city of Cleveland, but it ends up working out in Cleveland's favor. The St. Louis Rams basically benefit from this. They moved to St. Louis, if I'm correct, right?
So you're talking about the Browns moved there?
The Browns. They moved. Where did they move to?
Were they Baltimore? Or no,
Colts.
that was
I read it wrong.
Was that the Colts?
Yeah, it was Baltimore Colts.
And they moved to Indianapolis, and then the Browns moved to Baltimore to become the Ravens.
Okay, I was thinking wrong for some reason. I don't know why.
And it's another parallel with the St. Louis Cardinals football team, not the baseball team, but that's now Arizona. Is they moved in the middle of the night, and there's just very little 12 o'clock in the morning footage of the moving trucks going away. So it's a very interesting parallel to things that I've seen in person here in town. And yeah, I understand why they weren't happy.
Yeah, they weren't happy at all. And you're correct. It was the Browns moving to Baltimore. But to reiterate what I was saying, Cleveland still ends up on a good end of this. They got to keep the Browns' history. They got to keep the name the Browns. They got to keep all of that. And then after a couple of years when the NFL expanded again, they built a new stadium, and the Cleveland Browns were back in the NFL. I believe it was 1999 is when the team re-debuted in the city of Cleveland. And they were happy to have them back.
Yeah, and if there's ever a town like that they needed that. That's a pretty big identity from what I understand to them up there, and good for them. They work hard up there, and it sounds like they earned it.
Yeah, they earned it. They got their team back, and in 1987, they got TNT Motorsports to come into this venue. And I got to tell you, this is one of the more interesting camera angles that we have as far as a monster truck event goes. Here, you could definitely tell it's almost amateurish at times, but still, it's a very cool angle from what looks to be the home run plate, basically, of the stadium. They come racing down what looks like what would be, I would say, third base, maybe even first base from where they're at. But it looks like they come around the stadium in almost a U.
Yeah, this event is so different from pretty much anything you'll ever see out of TNT. Although they did do, I know in... what was it, the Georgia Dome down there in Atlanta, they did a similar style course. I think it was a little bit more of a turn that same year.
That wasn't the Georgia Dome. That was
Fulton County.
Yeah, it was Fulton County Fairgrounds,
correct, yeah.
I believe it was.
Yeah, so it was actually
they had a similar setup there, but they actually had the camera on the floor for most of that one there. This one, they're almost back in the stands filming for some of it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and it was Fulton County Stadium, which is where the Braves played.
I said fairgrounds, you said stadium.
Yeah, but 6 1/2 dozen the other. The point is TNT was doing some really weird tracks at this time that
they were booking any place they could probably book to get a show in and make a little bit of money, and I don't blame them at the time.
Oh, sure, yeah, you can't blame them for that, but it's ironic that the promotion that was looked at as the race promotion, and a lot of people still point to it to this day as this was the closest thing that that we ever had to a legit racing series. And some might argue Penda probably, probably holds a candle over TNT even on that. But regardless of the fact is, you're 1 year away from the national championship point series that everybody points to as this big turning point in the history of the sport. And you have two, big stadium shows where they just kind of throw a track out there that is not even, not fair, and is not conducive to the racing image that they really started building for themselves just the very next season.
Yes, but in a fair point there too. They know this isn't a points-paying event. They're going in here basically to put on a show. They even call the winner of this the world champion by the end of this event. I think it's basically just something they can pump out there. They can put out for what people do on YouTube nowadays. They put out content, and this was content.
And that's correct. When you're trying to, if that was their plan, was to go forward and present monster trucks not as this sideshow that, even to this day, some people see it as, they didn't do themselves a whole lot of favors in trying to change that image by, having tracks like this. That being said, yes, it's kind of cool and it's interesting, but sometimes it's almost interesting for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I can tend to agree with that. Our lineup for this show is kind of an all-star lineup as far as I'm concerned for 87. Mad Dog with John Breen, Dan Tassone and Star Monster, Jerry Richmond and Terminator, Dale Hancock and Crimson Crusher, Marvin Smith and Crimson Giant, Bennett Clark and the original Clydesdale, Rich Hoosier and Bigfoot 4, and Gail Mefford and Stomper, which, by the way, Stomper looks like it's sitting pretty high here. This truck's as stiff as a board in this event.
Yeah, this has to be just after, and I would have to look into the actual timing of this, but it has to be just after the point where the original Stomper Bully was rebodied as this yellow body Stomper.
Yeah, and they many times in this event they call it the Stomper Bull Chevrolet.
Correct, yeah, and it has to be, and it sure looks like. You're right, it is very, very tall built, and it actually remained that way for quite a while after this. Going back through that lineup, you have some interesting looks on some of these classic trucks too. You have Mad Dog in the time where it still had the all yellow paint, which I really like. I've always thought that was a really cool look for that truck. Star Monster is kind of interesting in that I don't know that it necessarily shows on the broadcast, but at the time, it's a very, very understated, almost like normal truck look to this truck at the time.
Yeah, to me, it looked like a truck you would see out on the road. They just put 66s on it.
Correct. And even seeing footage of it, around this exact time, the truck was actually still on the side of the truck labeled Star Truck, not Star Monster. There's a small little, just on the driver's door, forward part of the driver's door that says Star Truck. Part of the reason this truck changed looks, however, is literally, I think almost exactly a month later in New York, this truck actually broke in half. The frame actually snapped in half in a race against Stomper 1 and pretty much destroyed everything.
Yeah, I've seen the footage as well as you have. It just looks like the truck completely folds in the center.
Yeah, it's literally at the where the bed meets the cab, it is sitting pointed upward at about a 45-degree angle.
If you look at the truck the way that it normally is, and then just picture it being folded and the tires actually touching front to back, that's what it looked like. It just completely compressed. Put you in the mind of some of those Hot Wheels that they came out with Monster Jam, when they would crush and they would smash together almost. That's the best description I can give as to what Star Monster looked like right there. Here at this event, though, it's sporting that really cool, just almost stock appearing truck paint scheme. I kind of like this. I think it would be cool if a truck came out with this style of identity now. Heck, it would be very good to market to a potential major sponsor, say like a Chevrolet, or maybe even I'll throw a Toyota maybe out there. If you just have a stock appearing Toyota truck out there and call it Tundra. Just an example of something I think that might look really good as far as a sponsorship deal would go nowadays. But as we get into this event, though, Colby, like we said, very uneven course, but the commentary is also uneven all the way through it. It looks like there is just one announcer here that is talking this entire time. Of course, it's Army Armstrong. You hear his live event announcing, and it's always on point. Love Army as a live event announcer. We get a narrator that talks over this, and he is probably one of the most bland people I've ever heard in my life.
Yep, and that was pretty common with these. It was a production company called Billy Lindbergher Productions, and they did a lot of these, pretty much all of these early TNT events. They ended up doing the heart racing stuff later on as well. And it was very much just a churn it out. I mean, even parts where they should have shown some emotion, this voiceover guy does none. I'm sure
Does none
I
whatsoever.
mean,
we'll get into the big point of that here in a little while.
Sure.
At the beginning of this broadcast, though, he says they're the biggest and the best, and they are here in Cleveland to settle it once and for all as to who is the baddest of all the monster trucks. The line makes no sense to me. A battle in a sense would indicate that all these trucks are, a battle to settle things once and for all would indicate that there would be no more events taking place after this event. So to me, that's just an asinine statement. The winner here is the winner. It's not like we'll never see monster trucks again. That's my point that I'm trying to make here. It's a dumb statement to start off this monster truck portion of this show.
I would have loved to see all the trucks that didn't win in the end just chucked into the lake, like catapulted into the lake. I know I just made a whole bunch of people mad with all the history.
You just destroyed I'm going to get messages like you wouldn't believe. I already get messages from people when we mess up on this show. I get quite a bit of messages. Some people post it directly on my Facebook timeline. Let me know I screwed up.
Yeah, well, that's too bad. I say catapult Crimson Giant into into Lake Erie.
Oh, are you talking your retro version of Crimson Giant? Your RC?
Hey, that thing looks nice. No, I only picked that one out because I have a retro version of that, and an RC version of that. But no, it's it's hype. But when your voiceover guy sounds like Ben Stein, only without the comedy,
exactly.
There's not a whole lot of hype that can come from that. So it's weird, but that kind of goes along with this event. It's weird all the way across the board.
Yep, I agree. We get Stomper and Terminator shown in qualifying here. Stomper is first across the line, yet his reward in round one is to take on Bigfoot. I'm not sure. We're showing the graphic here of the round one matchups. And usually when you think monster truck racing and you think of an 8-truck bracket, you think of 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, et cetera, all the way through. In this, though, we get Bigfoot and Stomper in round number 1. And this was kind of TNT's main rivalry for a little while. In '87, this was considered their Ford and Chevy matchup.
Correct, and they even did like a lot of their arena crushes that didn't make it on TV were Bigfoot and Stomper. I mean, that was their big push. And later on, they even admit that Clydesdale was dead last in qualifying. So I'm not too sure why the bracket would have been laid out this way. I guess it's it kind of adds even more to kind of the slapdash thrown together feel of this event, which is ironic in a major stadium that when you're trying to, especially in light of some of the events that they did, in Houston and whatnot, and Indianapolis that were just amazing. Mm-hmm. This event comes across as very slapdash and thrown together and kind of not in line with a whole lot of their organization that they were really well known for.
Yep, that would come, like we said, the following year, and that would be a building process in its own for that whole season. But here, like I said, I think they're just trying to focus on mainly kind of what USHRA was doing, and that's the spectacle. We've talked about that before on the show. It seems like this was more about the spectacle than the race, at least to me. And the spectacle they give us in round one with Bigfoot and Stomper is quite a race that we see here. Both trucks are kind of even until about the second set of cars, the first set of cars. That's where the suspension on Bigfoot takes over, and you see Stomper, just the ride height of this truck. It's extremely high. It's bouncy. It bounces. It actually goes into Bigfoot's lane shortly after Bigfoot jumps the second car set on the track. I mean, that's grounds for disqualification, obviously, but if that would have happened maybe 6-8 inches sooner, we've got Bigfoot getting spun around on the course by Stomper.
Spun around if we're lucky, and those are two big heavy trucks, especially Stomper, and if that truck weighed a ton, had a lot of motor. It was carrying a lot, and both of the trucks were really carrying a lot of momentum. This race looks really, really fast on the footage that's shown. Stomper almost grabs too much of the brakes off of that last car set and noses over really bad. And you just briefly, you get visions of, Mike Witt in Charlotte endoing that truck in an arena because it too much more brake and that truck would have gone over. So
the vision that it gave me was something similar off of this very track that they did at Fulton a little bit later, or maybe a little bit before. I want to say it was before this one that they had that, but it was Digger 1 racing Bigfoot in round number 1, and the Digger just gets this really bad bounce in the rear, and you just see the truck just bouncing and going into the other lane, obviously. And the famous interview there with Kramer, "Oh, Gravedigger will never back down."
Yeah, imagine the grandma truck getting bouncy. I can't fathom that thought.
Now you're just poking fun at me. But anyway,
maybe a little, but regardless of the fact, Bigfoot wins this. But I don't think was really too much in question because the lane Bigfoot was in, that inside lane, was easily like 30 feet shorter than the outside lane.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too much of a surprise here. Bigfoot, by the way the pairings looked when they showed the graphic, and then again, we don't know who qualified where, but Bigfoot's name is at the top of the list. So that would make you assume that it's the number 1 qualifier. So Foot's going to have lane choice this entire racing bracket because at this time, it wasn't to the fastest truck per round. It was the fastest truck in qualifying that would get lane choice the entire night. So Foot's obviously going to stake claim on that left lane the entire night. And he would go on to take on the winner of this particular race coming up. We've got Terminator, which is a home state truck, taking on Crimson Crusher here. Jerry Richmond, who we talked about on last week's show, driving Overkill. Man, this is where he started out, though, in Terminator, and this short wheelbase little truck is something to behold and watch, but it's kind of outclassed here against Crusher.
Yeah, and you want to talk about tall.
Yes.
That truck, I mean, it's super short, think like hot stuff, high voltage Jeep short wheelbase, but probably 3 feet, 4 feet taller than those two ever were. Mm-hmm. Crimson Crusher was really kind of a hard charger at this time. And there wasn't a whole lot of doubt, and plus Crimson Crusher had the inside lane, so Crimson Crusher makes another really fast pass, and that's one thing I will say about this track is that kind of sweeping. I don't even know if it was a 45-degree angle turn, but that sweeping turn did not slow those trucks down a whole lot, and they carried a whole lot of speed over that middle roller and it onto that last car set. And Crimson Crusher definitely carries a lot of speed and a very smooth pass, especially for a truck that doesn't, and maybe that's part of it. It doesn't have the tire bounce because of those dualies. It looks very smooth and very fast on this course.
It looks very smooth, very fast, but I think also that as soon as he saw he got a little bit of a distance on Terminator, he kind of backed off a little bit.
Yeah.
Ironically, trying to save the equipment just a little bit as well. Yeah. And plus, this truck doesn't land very well at all. I mean, there's no bounce, and it definitely shows you there's no bounce because of how hard it looks like this thing hits.
It always does, but I think back to, I guess it was maybe War of the Monster Trucks where it does the arena crush, and he says, I built this truck to have a lot less bounce than the other trucks. Mm-hmm. So that worked for him. And I mean, all throughout 87, Crimson Crusher is a hard charger, and definitely one that's, if not in contention for the win, definitely one not to sleep on by any stretch.
Clydesdale and Crimson Giant coming out here next. Another kind of a one-sided matchup here, but that's really because Bennett breaks early. Something this Clydesdale truck kind of happened an awful lot with. It seems like the front end just never wanted to stay together on this old Clydesdale truck. And Crimson Giant goes on to take the win. Marvin had a really good run in his lane, though. He had the inside lane on this one, and I think he was going to win regardless. Bennett, not a really good showing for him here on TV, but hey, that's racing, really, honestly.
Yeah, that's racing. You break a tie rod and a bunch of other stuff, and I saw at least 3 of it's like 5,000 shocks that were underneath that truck hanging
exactly.
off of it. So he did some damage. Crimson Giant is one of those trucks that doesn't get a lot of credit. I get to see a lot of footage of this through some of the Hall of Fame stuff of this truck, and at this, he was a pretty good arena crush guy on some of the smaller tours, and by this point he had switched over to planetaries and narrowed up the ride a little bit, which at the time was kind of a thing they did when they did switch up to the planetaries, and it really made the truck a harder charger than I think people give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
Upper mid pack, and on a good day could definitely put a hurting on you. And it just doesn't get enough credit for being as good of a truck as it was. But yeah, when we have to send Clydesdale off to the old glue factory with all the breakage, it was a pretty easy win. But yes, I agree with you.
They give you a pretty good close up of the breakage on Clydesdale as well, and it's never good when you see the front tires facing the opposite directions of one another. And that's unfortunately what happens to Bennett right here. Next race, though, Star Monster, or actually you should say Star Truck, and Mad Dog here. It's an early appearance for both of these trucks without their signature paint schemes. You said earlier you like this all yellow looking Mad Dog. Me, I always preferred the TNT style looking Mad Dog of 88 and on. I always loved the white mixed in with the yellow. I thought it really popped that truck and made it look a little bit better than what it does here. Star Monster, though, is obviously going to go for a big upgrade paint scheme wise here in just a few months. Honestly, after this event, you could call this race the battle of the pre-paints, really.
Correct. And, one was forced and one wasn't. I don't dislike the second paint on this version of Mad Dog at all. It's beautiful. I just always loved the all yellow for some reason. It just hit me the right way. But Star Monster kind of had to. They call it Star Monster in the graphics and on the voiceover, so that must have been the name they were going for. But it definitely needed the upgrades after this. But another, and I say shocker in quotes, that Mad Dog on the inside lane, is probably going to get an easy win regardless here. Mad Dog was one of the few purpose-built race trucks at the time. And Star Monster, while it, kind of came into its own a little later on, and probably another truck that doesn't get the credit that it deserves for being as good as it became, it wasn't going to be, competition for Mad Dog here. And once it shut off at mid-track, it obviously wasn't going to have a chance regardless.
Yeah, I mean, Star Monster is out of the hole here first, but quickly out of the race after the first set of cars. As you said, Breen's truck is obviously the one set up specifically for racing here, and Mad Dog really shows it on that inside lane how fast it can be. And it would be interesting if on a fair course what this particular truck would have done against, say, Bigfoot later on a more fair course.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. This is another, video graphics guy thing. For whatever reason, John is all caps in this, so I guess we have to yell his name. Is that how that works?
That's exactly how it works. You didn't know that? John Breen.
Yeah, so it's not John Breen, it's John Breen, and it's why I guess that's why they did it, but another,
like earlier, instead of Terminator, it was Termination. I forgot to mention that.
How many times did they screw that up over the years for poor Jerry Richmond? Terminator.
How many times did they screw up Rich Hoosier's name?
Well, there's that. But remember Turbo and Raminator? I remember that one.
That one.
So
Wayne Smozaniel instead of Smozanic.
Yep. So yeah, these old school graphics, as we always talk about, especially in 1987, because this is really kind of the last year where the production isn't quite as good as it might get here down the line. Mm-hmm. And throughout this event, there's a whole lot of that, and we'll talk about more of that in this next race.
Speaking of this next race, though, this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to cover this show, was this race in particular, as we have some controversy here. This race is Bigfoot and Crimson Crusher. Bigfoot gets the early lead here. Crimson Crusher stalls off the starting line, and then all of a sudden, Bigfoot comes to a complete stop on top of the cars. Our narrator shows zero to no emotion, while you can hear Army Armstrong in the background on the live mic going absolutely nuts for this. And he should, because this is Bigfoot. Bigfoot is dead on the cars. Crimson Crusher is stalled. If Crimson Crusher gets going again, he's going to beat Bigfoot. And that's something you did not see on TV back in the day very much, if at all. Crusher does get going. He beats Bigfoot. And then the problem that we have here at the end of it is We talked earlier about how this truck has virtually no suspension. Crusher lands nose first, and the front end does exactly what Bennett's Clark and Clydesdale's truck did earlier. It pops and both front tires go the opposite direction of each other. Truck brakes. Bigfoot then, I'm assuming 5, maybe 10 minutes later, they finally get Bigfoot fired and Bigfoot finishes the course. But man, you didn't see this back in the day. It may have been sloppy as heck, but Crimson Crusher beat Bigfoot on a television broadcast.
Yeah, before I go too much into that, I mentioned the graphics. They have shown Rich Hooser's name 3 times.
And they still give him Rick on this one for some reason.
In the middle of the race, so before the race, it's Rich. The middle of the race, it's Rick. Mm-hmm. And then the next time they show him, as the truck is, starting to crawl off the cars, it's Rich again. So
you didn't know his evil twin brother actually took over middle of the race and then just hopped out.
There's a lot of that. I mean, evil twin brothers are maybe it was his identical twin cousin. I'm not really sure, but
identical twin cousin on his father's side.
Yeah, something along those lines. But yeah, this is a weird race. Crimson Crusher just basically dies, off of the first car set. And, Bigfoot dies coming over that first roller. And I would be willing to bet this took a lot longer than it probably played out on TV with the video.
You can
cuts.
see with the way that the edits go in this how long it actually took. I was assuming 5 or 10 minutes maybe to get Bigfoot fired again.
At least, because if you look, Crimson Crusher gets its whole front end folded up underneath it, and when you don't recognize the parts that are hanging off of the front of a truck, that truck. I mean, and there are parts hanging off, and you can't tell what they are because they're so mangled. That truck hit hard. And again, that goes to that truck was really good at landing flat, but anything other than flat, that was going to hurt. And it hurt a lot, both probably in his face hitting the steering wheel and in his pocketbook. Mm-hmm. But when Foot finally gets going and they show it on the broadcast, Crimson Crusher has been moved to a completely different part of the stadium. Yeah. Like it's way off against the wall. And so you're right, this had to have taken a while. This had to have taken 5-10 minutes, if not longer, before they finally get Foot moving. Yeah, as far as
in fairness, it gives the crew for Bigfoot time to go out there, run out there as they're moving that other truck before they can get to Bigfoot. They can get their truck fired. Sure, it's giving them time to get it fired and actually complete the round.
Correct. And that's kind of how they play it. I'm sure it didn't really matter whether Bigfoot finished the round because Crimson Crusher is not coming back.
Yeah.
Because Crimson Crusher is wadded up on the front end. But, we talk a lot about the who beat Bigfoot and when they beat Bigfoot early on. And, we don't have all these events in between to know whether, Bigfoot broke down and, some other truck beat it. And so I think more is made out of that sometimes than there really is. I'm sure
I'm guilty of that myself. I'll be like, hey, man, did you see this right? This could be one of the early times Bigfoot lost. And then somebody reminds me, yeah, but there was all these shows that weren't televised that we don't know anything about.
Correct. And the one that's always played as heads up, and I think this is the one that, as far as heads up racing, the Excalibur race the year before in Canada.
Yes. And
then from there, it's a crapshoot. I mean, this is definitely, I'm sure Dale Hancock got excited and, hey, I'm gonna beat Bigfoot, and it was still a huge deal at the time. I mean, think about Dennis and how big of a deal he made out of it, and was it Minneapolis and that race? I mean,
and St. Paul,
yeah, St. Paul, and it was a huge deal to beat that truck, even regardless of the fact that might be what happened with Crimson Crusher. Is he's like, hey, I'm gonna be Bigfoot, I'm really excited, watch me air this jump out. He aired a whole lot of fluid lines and cylinders and all sorts.
I mean, this to me is the equivalent of a drag racer that all of a sudden gets a bye run, he takes off and then crosses the center line, which is the grounds for an automatic disqualification. Except here there's a lot more damage to the truck.
Correct. I'm sure that was pretty expensive.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a pretty penny, just like it was in Louisville when this truck end-over-ended and just completely destroyed itself. We've covered that on the show before as well. Yeah. Next race, though, is probably what I would consider the race of the night. Mad Dog and Crimson Giant.
Yeah, it's they were both performing very well. You have Mad Dog, which obviously everybody knows, was one of the first, along with actually Bigfoot 4, which it shared this event with, one of the first built for racing, as opposed to, at least this version of Mad Dog, built for racing as opposed to, exhibition. Crimson Giant had made a lot of changes from 86 going into 87. It was kind of part of that was facilitated. It actually had an incident where it ran into King Kong ran into it and did a whole lot of damage to the truck. It's actually got a different paint scheme for this event than it started the year with. So they made a lot of changes performance wise, and this truck, like I said earlier, does not get the credit for being the performer that it was. And so you have a very little difference really between these two trucks, other than and I hate to keep ragging on the track, but I really feel like Crimson Giant lost by the track here, not by because the distance difference between these two lanes is basically the distance difference that Mad Dog beats Crimson Giant by here.
Yeah, and that's very true. I believe it to be 100%. Mad Dog goes on to take the win, but boy, for the first quarter, or maybe even first half of this race, they're trading the lead back and forth with each other. It's when they finally make that cut to head towards the final set of cars and then the last dirt hill that you really see Mad Dog get a distinct advantage over Crimson Giant. And that's where the race is won, right there. Mad Dog goes on to take the win by about a truck, maybe a truck and a quarter length over Marvin Smith here. Old Starvin' Marvin gave it everything he had, though, in that outside lane. He really wanted to be in that final, but unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be a Mad Dog Bigfoot final.
Correct. And Marvin had the lead over that middle roller. I mean, that's half track, and the turn happens after that middle roller. And just as soon as, I mean, I really feel like John Breen really laid into it. I mean, there's a difference in speed once they come over that roller, and he realizes, oh, I'm behind. But he also had at least 40 feet less to run, but he steps on it and then kind of gives it a DGAF, just gonna send it run for the last half of that. And
honestly, I think yes, that's where Mad Dog takes the lead, and that's where Mad Dog goes on to win. But one thing I want to point out here is it does look like Breen uses the right side of that lane quite a bit, and by that I mean he pretty much almost gets into the side of Giant. And I think Marvin might have backed out just a little bit at that point, knowing that, okay, we could collide here.
Correct. And he, obviously, as I just mentioned, just earlier in this season, a couple months before this, he had basically been run over in a, similar situation by a truck. So might have been a little gun shy. But also, when you're throwing two trucks all of a sudden with a little like dog leg in the last 2/3 of the, last third of the track, all of a sudden there's a dog leg that flings them both to the outside towards a wall. It's you're gonna probably get the tight cheeks a little bit there.
Just a little bit. This final though with Bigfoot and Mad Dog, I'm curious as to how they decided lane choice in this race, obviously, because you don't know what qualifying is here. You don't know if Mad Dog was faster than Bigfoot. You don't really know anything here, but obviously Bigfoot inside lane, Mad Dog outside lane. Breen's going to give everything he's got. But the reason that I pointed out what Mad Dog did in the semis, where he kind of leaned on the far right side of his inside lane, is because Bigfoot kind of does the same thing right here. They leave the line, they're almost together. By the time they get to that middle hill, it's very close, and you can see that Foot kind of uses that right rear to say, hey, all right, I got the lead. Yeah. Almost kind of like a slide job in a monster truck.
Yeah, and hey, it's there. Take it,
Yeah.
And the Bigfoot guys were really good at that, and that's kind of I wonder how much of the Jim Cramer influence there, because, you look at Houston 87, same year, I think a little earlier in the year, where he swings out and kind of barely taps, but definitely cuts off King Kong in that race. And, they weren't afraid to do that over the years. And it got to the point where people weren't afraid to do that back. But they're hey, it's there. Take it, make it happen. So, yeah, they definitely did. He did kind of slide over just enough not to be illegal. But,
yeah, just enough not to be illegal, but enough to make people question it, I think.
Yeah, and really, I think the number one that's going to question it, and I don't mean question it like question the legality, but question like, do I want to continue to send this truck, was John Breen.
Yeah, exactly.
And hey, like you said, that's like a slide job. It's racing. So
Yep. I can't iterate though. Bigfoot goes on to win this, but I imagine there's still a little bit of doubt in people's minds here. Oh, could Bigfoot really have won on this night? I mean, Crimson Crusher does beat it in the semifinals. If the final is different, it's Mad Dog and Crimson Crusher. Who do you got?
I think it depends on the lane with those two trucks, because you talk about some history there with those two trucks just about a month or really a couple months later. They're both
end
fast.
Over end rollover when they're side by side racing each other in Louisville.
Yep, and they're fast, and they're racing on kind of a similar setup with a roller and some cars and a roller, and yeah, that's I don't know that I can make a call there. I feel like maybe Crimson Crusher might have been a little bit faster truck at the time, but Mad Dog was definitely set up probably a little bit better.
I think Crusher was the faster truck. It just did not have the suspension. I think Mad Dog didn't have quite the motor, but it had the suspension.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's a 50-50 double-edged sword right there. And like you said, I think that it would come down to whoever had lane choice, unfortunately.
Correct. Yeah. And that's the story of this show is, in a different circumstance. I have a feeling they built this track, probably up against the outfield wall. It looks like.
Yes.
And reason being is, hey, we don't want you tearing up our grass. We don't want you tearing up our infield. So, okay, I get it. But, yeah, it definitely left a kind of a bad taste in your mouth, number one, and number two, kind of what ifs that we really can't answer. And the what ifs are why we're here, though.
Yep, that's exactly why I wanted to cover this show, is that what if Crimson Crusher does get to the final? I mean, it's a very controversial race that does end up with Rich Hoosier and Bigfoot taking yet another win here. Bigfoot number 4 looking flawless on the night, other than the semifinals where it has that hiccup in the engine. Not sure exactly what that was. Be a question for Rich Hoosier and whoever's crew guy was that night. But still, Foot goes on to take a win, and maybe there's a lot of people in Cleveland that were kind of shaking their heads at that.
Perhaps, but all they show are 3, and in my notes, 3 drunk idiots are shown for the second time, as I guess they shot these guys, and they liked the fact that they were, waving, a couple of them wearing 2 hats pointed in opposite direction. They've shown this at least twice in this show. So even if it did kind of leave a, that kind of sucks feel, and they didn't hint at it because all they kept showing were these 3 drunk idiots.
Yeah, unfortunately though, sometimes they get some stock footage, and it's never the best stock footage. But man, right here though with this show, I gotta say, to me, it's a short little clip almost in this really long pulling event. There are, I think, 2 other, like if you were to search this up on YouTube, there are different parts of this. Part 3 is the monster trucks. It's about a 9.5 minute clip, give or take, that you get for all of this racing. But in that 9.5 minutes, there is some drama. And it's all centered around mainly that semifinal race with Bigfoot and Crimson Crusher. But then you get to see this Mad Dog Crimson Giant race that is just amazing. That semifinal is literally Crimson. Let me tell you that.
Yeah, it really, I mean, it's interesting that you could have dragged this out a little bit more and made more of a big deal out of it. And this goes back to, and I think we talked about this literally every time I've been on your podcast here, Josh, is this was put together to fill time late at night on ESPN or on a Sunday afternoon when nobody's home on ESPN. And so they didn't care about, they had a 30-minute or 1 hour slot. They didn't care, let's just shove as much as we can in there. And I think about, as somebody who covers events for video, for YouTube, for basically internet television, I think about the drama that I could have created with this, and the what ifs and all the questions, and how that might have helped this show. I've covered some shows with some very uneven tracks, just like this, where people are questioning it. Everybody knows it's uneven, and it just it made for some cool races, but overall, it just made this, this event just really not that good, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean the production standpoint of it, it's very amateurish. I mean, I said that the way that they filmed it from the angle that they had was really, it was a cool angle. The problem is there is a couple of shots in here that just kind of make you scratch your head, and one of them being, I think it was the Bigfoot Crimson Crusher race, where all of a sudden the camera zooms so far out, and then within 2 seconds they're zooming all the way in as far as they can to get this race on this
Yeah,
camera. I think it was that race that
yeah,
that
they
happened on.
actually missed the first couple
They
seconds of
missed the
that
start.
race.
They flat
Basically,
missed the start.
Crimson Crusher is already dead and
Yeah.
rolling to a stop as they snap zoom in on this because, oh, well, you guys are going to race now. What are we here for? And
And
and so
to me, not the camera work is the biggest disappointment. The biggest disappointment is the narrator here.
correct.
This guy is just horrible. When Crimson Crusher breaks,
Unbelievable.
in the most monotone sounding voice, like this dude just broke the front half of his truck off, and you can hear Army Armstrong in the background going nuts and selling this to the crowd. And this guy, he doesn't even make an opportunity to sell it. He just says it like you made a point about Ben Stein earlier. To me, all I heard in my head was
Bueller.
Yeah, exactly. And I've in the past in some articles I've written, I've given Dave Grimm a hard time, for the screaming into the microphone and the incomprehensible things that he says.
Mhm.
When you're begging for literally anyone else to call this event for television, I mean, I would take literally anyone I've ever heard over just this monotone call of what really was kind of a wild moment. I mean, you have the most popular truck, the most feared truck, the biggest truck literally in the world by far, not even close, and it's broken, and this other truck is going all out to make sure it beats it, and just wads up probably $10,000 worth of parts on the front end, and literally all you get is
Unbelievable.
it just, oh, it grates on me so bad.
Yeah, it grates on me too. I mean, how hard would it have been to get Army Armstrong to just come and stand in front of that camera and talk?
Well,
I understand the narrator for the beginning portion of it. I understand the narrator for some more intense things, like maybe right after that, and they're talking about how the crew is right up there by the truck or something like that. I could understand that voice there. But when something like that happens, it's a catastrophic event or catastrophic thing within this event, there needs to be some kind of emotion behind it. And then there is none here.
and maybe this is the price we pay for the coverage we get just a year later with TNT.
Yeah.
Because the coverage, I mean, say what you will about that series, and I know most people, it's like, the end all be all. Some people there, there's a minority of fans that TNT kind of grates on them a little bit, but regardless of the fact, they made you either fall in love with or hate or feel for every driver in that tour.
Yes.
And they made Army Armstrong into, I mean, that the Army Armstrong made himself into, but that the way the production worked, Army Armstrong was cemented as absolute legendary Hall of Fame announcer. But just 1 year before, they put it in the hands of this production company out in North Carolina that just doesn't seem to care. And they did this a lot to other. I mean, you see, and I mentioned that they did the coverage for the heart racing stuff, that very next year, and you see that double roll with Bigfoot and with Hercules, where Hercules wipes out an ESPN camera, and it's the same thing. You hear the announcer. I think it was Dave Grimm. You hear him just going ape in the background. And you get this monotone, oh my goodness, both trucks rolled over, and it's not how you sell this sport. The sport is larger than life. The sport is big, it's loud, it's powerful. Monotone is not how you sell it.
Yeah, put that voiceover, that unbelievable, over some of the biggest events in sports history, and you'll understand how terrible that call is. I mean, we could put it up against the Drive when they score that touchdown with Elway right there. If you imagine Elway throwing that touchdown, the place inside the stadium going nuts, and then all of a sudden you hear the announcer,
Unbelievable.
just completely drains the emotion. And that's
Dude.
something that happened in the early days of monster trucks that honestly could have really helped the sport out if there had just been a little bit more emotion shown. And I think they did that very well in 88, 89, and 90 with Army, Scott Douglas, Richard Leake, those guys behind the microphone instead of a monotone announcer. And I hate to say it, I do like Dave Grimm, but he didn't need to be in TNT at that point. They did a great job of it in years past this.
Could you imagine in 1980 Lake Placid, do you believe in miracles?
Yes.
Yep. I mean,
I sure do believe in miracles. How about you?
Yeah, that was the thing that popped into my mind is, do you believe in miracles?
First thing that popped into my mind was a John Wayne movie and his monotone voice.
Yeah, but John Wayne was cool.
I don't know. John Wayne calling monster trucks. Now you know what, ladies and gentlemen, that could be the next thing that we get on the internet is just a random John Wayne clip with monster trucks in the background. Well, looky there, partner.
somehow that would be cool rather than this.
Somehow that would be cool and way more interesting than unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Yeah, so we get John Wayne and Ben Stein to call monster trucks and probably still more entertaining and exciting than this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Monster Trucks presented to you by John Wayne and Ben Stein. You're going to have a great time.
We'll sell you the whole seat, but you will only need the edge.
Oh, with that said, I know we've harped on that, but man, that's one of the biggest pet peeves that I have about early monster trucks is some of the just most bland announcing in the world. And you hear the live event announcer in the background just going absolutely bananas, if I might borrow a phrase from the late great Gorilla Monsoon. And then you get guys like this narrator here that sounds like he should be on an early, like a Saturday morning cartoon of Thomas the Tank Engine. It just completely drives away some of the bigger and more impactful moments in the sport.
Yeah. Yeah, we just didn't need PBS doing monster truck announcing at this point. And especially on an event that had its issues. I mean, you have a really bad track. I haven't even mentioned, and I've got this in my notes 3 or 4 times, how dusty. Mm-hmm. Water your track. Water the track if you're covering it for national television. And there are times where you can't see the other truck because it's so dusty.
Yep.
And and for all of its problems, you can cover that. And I've seen it, you've seen it, how many times where a good announcer can cover a bad show. But a bad announcer can ruin a really good monster truck show. And I'm sure their live is a completely different experience because you got Army Armstrong.
Yeah, they're live. If you like the beginning of this clip of monster truck racing that we have here, you can hear Army in the background. You can hear the crowd. It sounds like they're into it. But for the TV audience, we don't get to hear that, and that is a major issue if you're going to put something on television like that. That's to put it in an equivalent of a pro wrestling experience. Whenever they hired Mike Adamle to cover Monday Night Raw, how horrible he was to try and cover a professional, well, not what I want to call a professional sport, but still to cover an event like that absolutely needs punctuation on how exciting stuff is, and he can't even get the guys' names right.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect parallel for we can't get the chyrons, the lower third graphics. We can't get those right. We can't get the announcing right. And it's interesting you brought up Mike Adamle because he always made American Gladiators really, really interesting.
Yeah, he made American Gladiators great, but if you put him in something that he can't understand, then he's going to do terrible. Jeff Harvey is the example I'll give you right there.
Jeff Harvey, yeah. Well, maybe we needed the American Gladiators announcer, like laser. We needed something like that for this.
We needed something like that to draw some energy out of this broadcast.
Yeah.
But honestly, watching this back, it's like nails on a chalkboard listening to that just monotone guy. And I know we're harping on this. We really are. But man, that is just the most annoying thing about some of this early stuff. And I know I've said that before, but again, I can't stress it enough. And it's something that we need back in the sport as well, because nowadays with, I'm not going to name any promoters or throw any of the promoters under the bus, but there are some times where you almost want to reach into the TV and smack them to just get some sort of emotion other than a smile out of them.
I know a lot of these announcers, especially, they kind of get their, they get their script And it's not even a script necessarily for a lot of them. It's just a script that runs through their head because they've done it 834,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's the same thing over and over and over and over. And I get that. But this guy, this was brand new at the time. It was monster trucks, and we're trying to sell it. And we're trying to, we're trying to make, trying to make it into what it eventually becomes. And this doesn't add to that in any way, shape, or form. And again, it could have saved a whole lot of the bad parts of this event. The bad track, the too much dust.
And one thing that I'll point out too here is, for some reason, and I may be completely wrong here, but I looked through some stats in the following years. I looked through stats in years prior to this. I don't recall there ever being another show at this particular event.
Yeah,
this particular stadium.
And I wondered about that as well. And I noticed that, if little inside baseball, Josh, shares his notes with at least with me. I'm sure he does it with all of his guests here.
Don't give away my secrets.
Well, it helps add to it. But you mentioned that, and I wonder if this wasn't just one of those, hey, we've got a date, you want to come in and do it, and it was really quick, and there wasn't any thought to doing it again. And you're right. You look at the crowd, and the crowd probably wasn't as big as it could have been for this event. And, especially in a 80,000 seat stadium with, a city that is blue collar, and there's only so much. And I keep coming back to that because I live in a city just like this. St. Louis is very similar to this. There's only so much entertainment dollar to go around.
Yeah.
And so, they're not going to fill 80,000 seats. Now, they don't have to for this event. You're booking 8 monster trucks. I know, Bigfoot is the draw that it is, but you're booking 8 monster trucks. You're booking pulling, you're booking, so you don't have to sell it out. But I guess this was just one of those like quick experiment things that just didn't work for anyone. And who knows what the rent on that giant, cavern of a building was. You just don't know. But yeah, you're right. I don't recall them, anyone. I don't know if anyone ever came back to that building for monster trucks. I can't. If they did, I don't recall it.
Yeah, I don't recall it either. And normally I'd see something in there about maybe another motorsport that came in there, like Pontiac Silverdome. There was some dirt track racing. Same with down in Texas at the Astrodome. This place, there's no other really motorsport history that I could find relating to this other than the monster truck event that we have here and the pulling event that we have here. And I'm sure there are going to be people that tell me I'm wrong, but at the same time, if you can prove it to me, show it to me, and I will cover it on this podcast, and we will make it correct.
Yeah, and we want to know. I
want to know too. If there was another race here, say if there was a Penda event here in the 90s, oh man, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Huge building, huge floor. It would there's so much potential there.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just this one came together in a way that really just, it's like sitting on a tack, on a thumbtack. It doesn't sit right. None of this, the production, the track, that being said, going back through there was a lot of really cool racing in this event.
Yeah, there was some great racing in this event. As a matter of fact, the problem is it just wasn't really shown all that well.
Well,
and it wasn't really brought out all that well. We'll put it that way. Just the overall of it, I gave it a 4 out of 10, and I think that's even generous for it, as far as I'm concerned. Out of rating 1 to 10, what did you think it was worth?
Oh, I think you're being generous at a 4. This is literally my least favorite TNT event of all time. Does
that go along with all the other TNT events that you said that about?
I can go back and you think about some of the stuff in '87 that was played.
Mm-hmm.
That Charlotte. We mentioned that earlier with the Mike Witt rollover that weekend. That is same production company, same and it comes across as a much better event. Mm-hmm. This one just doesn't. If we're gonna give it an out of 10 rating, I'm gonna go. 2.5 is coming into my head, and I'm debating on the half. Like I want to give this just like a 2 out of 10 just overall.
Yeah.
With the 2 being completely and utterly having to do with the racing itself, but everything else about this event just drives me nuts.
I usually do my ratings like I give 5 towards a good event production wise, and I give 5 towards the racing aspect of it. And I kind of gave both a 2. So if that makes sense, I'm really doing a rating out of 5, but I combine it together to get that 10, and I'm really giving it a rating of a 2 for the broadcast and a 2 for the racing, because to me there was really only those really 2 awesome races, and that was Mad Dog Crimson Giant, Bigfoot Mad Dog.
Yeah, I'm giving it a 0 on the broadcast and the production and all of that, and the two is
2 goes towards the racing itself.
Two is solely towards the men inside of these trucks for what they did to try to make a really bad situation into
chicken salad out of,
a solid effort.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, Colby, for popping on here. Anything you want to say about MTRC before we hop out?
Oh no, I mean we're chugging along. Actually, we're recording this on a Tuesday. 2 days from now, I'm going to debut the first video from our last event. So looking forward to bringing that one out. We had a lot of fun this last time.
Yes, we did.
Did a little bit more kind of screwing around, for lack of a better way to put it, and it was a blast. So this one will be our vintage class with some racing and some wheelies and just us, having fun and playing around.
And it's a replica of Buffalo 1987, a show you and I have covered on this event before, or this podcast before, not this event. But I mean, it was just a lot of fun, and man, there were a couple of races I had with Jason Childress that were flat out on that track that looked really cool. I can't wait to see them actually aired on YouTube.
You and Jason were really, as I looked back on the footage, really put on a show on that one. We had a lot of fun watching you two race, especially. I think you guys had maybe 3 really good races between your new Gravedigger 2 and his King Crunch, his blue and yellow King Crunch, that are some of the better racing we've had there, and looks super realistic and looks like it belongs. And yeah, we had a whole lot of fun with that one. So.
Yep, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So you guys got the scoop here first. In 2 days, you're going to see it on the YouTube channel for MTRC, and you'll hear about it this Friday when this show comes up live. So I hope that you guys listen to this show and then jump over to the MTRC YouTube page and give it some love, because it really deserves it.
Well, we appreciate that, Josh. I mean, you're a big part of it with us. We really love what we do out there and have a lot of fun trying to recreate some of these old events, although I can promise you this track, number 1 because of space, but number 1B or 1A because it's so awful, will never appear on an MTRC event.
I'm sure we're all disappointed about that. With that said, though, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning into the Retro Monster Truck Review. We'll see you guys again on the tracks across America.
5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
And Crimson Giant.